So how does remote viewing work? How is it that you can be sitting somewhere in a deep state of quiet meditation and suddenly intend and you see a distant place? And it may be next door or it may be on the other side of the galaxy. It happens because the mind is omnipresent. That's the whole meaning of non-locality. Omnipresent means it's everywhere. So once you own and accept the fact that your consciousness is a ray of that infinite sun and that it's always connected to this unbounded state, you can then intend and with confidence say, I wish to see X, wherever it is. And with practice, you will see it. Now, it may not happen instantly. This is not the McDonald's drive-through of consciousness development. But with practice, like all things, it will develop. And it's absolutely can be developed in every man, woman, and child. And this is actually what we should be teaching preschool and kindergartners, is the science of consciousness, in my opinion. That should be the first course, stripped of the religiosity and the catechisms and the bullshit. Okay, another social commentary, I'll move on. Now, the other thing is that how do you do it? Okay, so you're doing this meditation and you're very quiet. After maybe half an hour or 15 minutes, you're at this point of deep quiet. Maybe you then lie down or whatever, and then you introduce the intent. Again, it's just like using the mantra. You don't brutally focus on it. You intend and ask to know. So you ask to want to see what's in a box that you haven't opened yet. What's in there? You see? And with practice, you can go back and forth and learn to do it. What's really key is to understand there are these phases when you're first learning this. Eventually, you just do it all simultaneously. But initially, there's the meditative phase, where you're going deep into quiet meditation and becoming relaxed, and the mind is expanded and clear. Then there's the phase where you intend, and you're asking to know something or see someplace, even if it's in the future or past. But you're wanting to know something that is accessible because your mind is now in a deeper aspect of itself that has broken the boundaries of just your own individuality and your own ego. It's actually free, and you're soaring in this ocean of expanded awareness. Very beautiful, fun experience. Easy to do, actually. Then you see something. Now, here's where the rubber meets the road, and if you're taking notes, take them assiduously at this point. Because at that point, and precisely at that point, when it starts to unfold, then the ego jumps in, or the intellect, or your memory stores, or your expectations, and you start filling in the blanks and confabulating. Not on purpose. It's just the nature of the individual mind to do this. So it gets ahead of itself and trips up. It's like tripping over your own feet when you're learning to walk or run as a little child. I used to do it all the time because I was so clumsy and tall. Tall people just fall down all the time. They're little. And so you get ahead of yourself and trip over your own feet, as it were. You're metaphorically, spiritually, you're tripping over your own feet. Why is that? Because the individual ego wants a quick answer and wants to not be patient and stay with the unfolding, organic unfolding of what it is. And the only way to really get around that is that when you find yourself doing the, I call it the monkey mind, the individual ego trying to get ahead of itself, just take a deep breath and then return to meditation. Stop the remote viewing. Go back into deep consciousness, and when you're deep and centered and quiet, then continue the remote view. You understand this iterative back and forth? Very important. This is where everyone misses by not doing that. There's a discipline and a self-checking that takes place. And then you go back to the remote viewing. And then little by little you become more comfortable just being in a relaxed state and letting it just unfold. And it may unfold in a nanosecond. Boom. Like a packet of knowledge Or it may take several minutes. You may find yourself almost like in a dream state, going through all the details of a vision, like Bill has had. So it can happen in 1,000 different ways. The other thing is to understand, some people will just get a knowingness, and it'll come in and they'll understand. Other people are very visual, and they'll see visually. Other people are very verbal, and they'll actually see words. Other people are more mathematical or graphic and schematics, and they'll get dates and times and coordinates and longitude and latitude. So this is the other thing to realize. Everyone is different in how they acquire knowledge through consciousness, as the unbounded mind is interfacing with your individuality, which is that unique one of 7 billion spokes going into the hub of the wheel of life. Does that make sense? And that is okay too. Don't think that you have to do it visually or verbally, or you do it the way it comes to you. And it's beautiful when you go, well, I'm who I am, and I will discover it the way I discover it. Because I'm a unique person. I don't have to imitate Joe or Carol or whoever, or Maharishi or Guru, whoever. No, you don't have to. Because you're your own person, and all knowledge is folded within each individual. So that's really a key part of the technique. Then, after you've gotten the information, here's another problem. Most people then don't act on it. So you're in a meditative state, you get intuition, it seems like it's too bizarre, and you don't act on it or you don't share it. So then you have to have enough confidence, but also humility, and one might even say shamelessness, to just go ahead and share it. And not be afraid of ridicule, and not be afraid of making mistakes, because we learn much more from our mistakes than our successes. Absolutely true. So then you start acting on it, and then you find out it was correct or it wasn't. Now, this is a really important thing, is that when you begin to practice this, and you get your off mark, you begin to have to analyze, how did it feel, what did I do, and what did I make up that it was in an inaccurate remote view, versus something that was spot on. How did that feel? There's a feeling, there's a sort of a sense of it. And I call this the refinement of your truthometer, your truth meter inside, where you just get a sense of it. And the more you have successes, the more you know what it feels like when it's an accurate perception of remote viewing through consciousness. And the remote viewing being of the future, or of a distant place, or of an ET craft, or whatever. Now, as you are practicing this, so here are the phases. The meditative phase, going into quiet mind and relaxed. Then intending to know something with confidence and faith that in fact you can, because the mind is omnipresent. And then allowing it to organically unfold, and it may take a nanosecond or it may take an hour. Doesn't matter. Remember, time is irrelevant. And then if you find yourself distracted, return to the meditative state, and then return to the remote viewing after you're in a quiet, deeply centered state. And then, after you've completed the remote viewing process, do an objective checking. See if it actually was accurate or not. Now, there are exercises one can do where this can be done where you quicken the pace of it. For example, with your partner or your CE5 group or your car group, you can have one person who I call the control, and the other one, or the other ones, if there's more than just one other, who are the people who are practicing the remote viewing. And let's say the control person is in fact transmitting to the other person or people what their mother's house looks like. Now, they don't know what the mother's house looks like, but they're transmitting it. And they actually can give the address of the house. Hopefully no one goes on Google Satellite and looks at it. And they can give, what the city is and even the street address, so people can kind of get a sense and go to it. But then no more. And then let the people who are doing the training, the experiment, sort of go in and provide that information. And after 10 or 20 minutes, everyone shares. And the person who's the control will say, well, this part was right, and this part was wrong, and this part. And then after that, when it's kind of unveiled what the house really looked like, and it was a 2-story or 1-story or a ranch or a brick or this, what did the living room look like, all the details. Then each person has to do what I call this reassessment of, they were getting the fact that it was a brick house, they turned it into a ranch house because they were filling in the blanks, and it was actually a 2-story Georgian. Or they got, you see what I'm saying? So then you want to go back and analyze where you were correct and where you got off mark. And you do that as sort of an honest checking. So that's one thing. Another thing is that you can have one person who puts an object in a box or a basket, and nobody knows what it is but the control. And you all go through the meditation, and then the remote view, and then you share what your impression is before the box is open or the basket is open. I do this a lot with groups, and I've done it with complete novices, where it's amazing how accurate people are if they go through this very scientific process of meditation and remote viewing and then the checking, and do it over and over again. So at that point, you will all see what it is. Now, maybe someone put an orange in there, like you would eat. Well, someone could see that it was round, and they turned it into a tennis ball because the monkey mind leapt ahead. Or someone sensed it was something to eat, and they put an apple in there because they like apples better than oranges. And that's where you have to do this honest reassessment after the control person has opened up or shared what it actually was. Does this make sense? Yeah. Is this helpful? And you can do this at home. You do it with your spouse. You can do it with your friends. It's really fun. And there's another technique. So you have, the sharing of an objectively proven thing, like a distant target, like a house or a building or what have you. You have putting an object in a basket or a box. Another one that a NASA scientist actually shared with me is doing what's called emotive listening. And that's where you have one person or more that will agree on that are the controls, that will agree on a scenario and an emotion. Now, this gets closer to what we're doing with the ETs and telepathic communication. So let's say that you have 4 people, 2 of them are the controls, and they agree, they get it away from the others and say, okay, let's show the joy and the excitement of the baby being born, a child being born. And so they very quietly go into meditation, all of them together, once they've made that choice. The other 2 don't know. And you go into that, and this requires that the control people go into deep meditation and into the hub of that silent mind, while the others who are trying to acquire what the emotion and scenario is, join them. Feel it, see it, sense it. And the people who are the controls are as critical in that exercise as the ones who are doing the experiment. Because now it's a 2-way telepathic exchange. And then all parties then have to do the deep meditation and going into the remote view, except one is receiving and one is transmitting. So you have the transmitters and you have the receivers. It's exactly what we're doing with ETs, actually. It's a great experiment to do with your group. So at that point, you do that for 10 or 15 minutes, however long, and then you ask the people who were the receivers to give their impressions. And there are 2 components here. What emotion did they feel, and what was the scenario? And we have found an enormously high concordance with emotion and pretty high concordance with scenarios when we're training people to do this. And the more you practice that, the more accurate you get. Now the reason these exercises I've just outlined are so critical is that when we're out under the stars and we're doing one more thing, we're doing the meditation, we're then expanding awareness in remote viewing space or the area, and then we're doing the coherent thought sequencing, where after we've sensed an ET craft or plant or person, we're vectoring them, we're showing them our location. Now, unless you have a lot of practice doing meditation and remote viewing and this checking process with objectively provable things, and you get a high degree of accuracy, when you're doing it with ET events, unless there is an actual physical event that happens that has been foreseen and shared, which often does happen, you're not going to know whether it's accurate or not, but it's still important to share it. So what you want to be able to do is do these, if you will, training exercises in the science of consciousness, so that then when you're together out under the stars, you're developing that skill set and getting the feedback on objectively proven things. For example, if someone says, oh gosh, I went over to Mars and I went underneath and I saw this and that, well, we don't have a probe that can go there and actually photograph whatever it is you remote viewed. But we do have the ability to open a box and say, well, see, this was actually an orange. You see what I'm saying? So developing that, practicing this as a set of exercises using different techniques increases your accuracy on doing it when you're together out under the stars, when you're actually not doing a test, you're actually there. And so much so that you'll actually develop the ability to have members of your team go into quiet consciousness and have lucid dreams the week before you go out, who will see or sense things that will happen. The most important CE5s I've ever been involved with, I've had lucid dreams about them before they happen, a week before they happen. So that is a skill that you develop as a team and as an individual. And then there are other techniques. Another technique to do is what I've been sharing each night to remind you to try to do. I want to talk about a little more. And that is the, excuse me, the power of the dream time, what the Aboriginals in Australia call dream time. Because the dream state, very interestingly, I think the Creator has put this within humans because almost everyone at some point has had a lucid flying dream or a dream of something that has happened in the future. How many people have had a lucid flying dream? Right. And how many people have actually had a dream of something that occurred later in your life or the next day or something? About half the people. So how does that happen? Well, when the body is asleep and the intellect is shut off and the ego is more quiet, the astral body, the body of light in a lucid dream, can awaken and can explore the cosmos. Now, practicing lucid dreaming means being aware of the science of consciousness and the technology of the dream state, that it's real and not just imaginary, but also practicing being awake within the dream, which is what a lucid dream technically is. So you're in a dream, but you're aware that it's a dream and you're awake in it, and you can actually affect what you're doing in the dream. See? So you're actually affecting it.
Is that like a deja vu?
No, it's not at all deja vu. This is simply being in the dream, being awake in it, and as the dream is unfolding, you know you're in a dream, but you also know you can intend to go somewhere. So you want to go out to the moon, or you want to go over to California, and you develop that. Now, the mindfulness that's required to do that is that as you go to sleep, is that you remind yourself that the dream state is within all of us, and you ask the Great Spirit to open your inner sight, and then you start practicing mindfulness. Now, most people forget their dreams very quickly, which is why I say if you keep a journal, like a piece of paper and a pen by your bed, if you have one of these kind of dreams and jot it down, it will help train you to remember your dreams and become more mindful in the dream. So the dream journaling is very, very powerful. And I recommend that people do that when they're starting out with this, because it will create this dynamic where you will be more inclined to remember the dream and be mindful and awake within the dream, which then leads to this lucidity of dreaming, where you're actually doing things in the dream state. So in that state, you can traverse the entire cosmos. You can go into the future, you can go into the past. Just like in meditation, because it's consciousness, it's the astral. It's not bound by linear 3D or 4D. 3D being, you know, space and 4D being time. So you're in a state where you're beyond 4D. Now you're in 5, 6, 7, whatever D, consciousness worlds. And there are no, the laws of physics of the physical universe don't apply. And then you have this enormous freedom, just like in the meditative state, but it's while you're sleeping. And what you begin to realize is that 24 hours a day you have opportunities for this kind of spiritual development and the development of these capabilities. And it's a matter of knowing it and intending to use it. And unfortunately, most of us just simply do not take the time to do it. And when you do, a little bit of effort in that direction over a period of time, maybe 6 months, a year, it depends on the person, you begin to have exponential growth curves. And so that's what I recommend that people begin to practice. Meditation, remote view training, using these exercises with controls, and dream time. And that then prepares you in the science of consciousness to be a really effective ambassador to the universe when you're out under the stars with a group of people, which optimally would be 3 to 8 people. It's you know, this is a training, and my time is very limited, but I would say, you know, just in terms of maintaining coherence and nominal levels of chaos, you don't really want dozens of people, unless you're an incredibly skilled coordinator and perhaps more patient than I am, which wouldn't be hard to do. My Achilles heel is, you know, patience with craziness, as you can tell. So,
also, you're a gift and calling, though. That's why you're doing what you're doing.
Sure. Yeah, of course. But I joke about it. You have to maintain that kind of discipline. Yes.
Just a comment. If there's anybody here that has doubt what's been said since the break, it's referred to as quantum entanglement.
Mm-hmm.
And Einstein, he said, this is theoretically possible, but I don't believe it. Okay. No, wait, I'm not finished. He died in 57, still with this contention. But after he died, 4 independent labs repeated studies that showed, yes, this does work, this is true.
Right.
Quantum entanglement.
Right, look it up. Yeah, that's true. And of course, even Einstein talked about the spooky effect.
Yeah,
you know, a particle could be in 2 places at once,
right,
in non-locality. And it was observed and it was proven, but he didn't really have the understanding of this other trans-dimensional or multi-dimensional understanding to grasp it. But it certainly has been understood for thousands of years by almost every shaman and every enlightened teacher in most civilizations.
Yeah.
It's only recently that humans have fallen so out of touch with this innate ability, and to where reductionist science has kind of beat that out of us through our education and our paradigms of belief. And I think that that's going to be something that will come at a point, and we're quickly coming to a point, where linear objective sciences are going to be supported at the same time the science of consciousness develops. And then we're going to really see our civilization take off. So there are 1 or 2 other things I want to share. Some of these abilities I've mentioned fall under, I mentioned over the last couple of days, the word siddhis, S-I-D-D-H-I-S. The Vedic siddhis are a reference to the innate abilities and powers that humans have that develop with the development of states of consciousness. So as your consciousness develops, to be honest, spontaneously, you become able to do remote viewing more easily, lucid dreaming more easily, precognition. Eventually it crosses over to where you're able to do things like remote healing very effectively, levitation, where you can sit and in a state levitate, which I've done before, where your physical body levitates. And you can do things such as dematerialization, rematerialization, or alter the angular spin, momentum of your physical body, where you can walk and go straight through solid matter, which are reports of masters who've done this. It's totally doable. There's a whole sort of another constellation of these so-called cities that can be developed. Now, a word of caution. My view of it is that if you develop the higher states of consciousness and go in and out, practice mindfulness, and go into enlightened state of consciousness, the various cities I've just referred to will spontaneously begin to unfold. There's a wonderful story of the Buddha happening across a man who had spent 30 years practicing to be able to levitate across a stream. And he was full of self-pride and ego over this. And he said, "Oh, Buddha, look," he says, "I have done this and mastered the ability to watch, and I can float and levitate over the stream." And the Buddha said, "Oh yes, you have done very well with that." And then there was a footbridge, and the Buddha walked across the footbridge and to the other side where the man was. He says, "But you wasted 30 years of effort. You could have just walked across the bridge." There's a lesson there. Yeah. So, you know, if you develop higher states of consciousness, and let me go through those in a succinct fashion. The waking state most of us are in, we're aware of ourselves, and that's it. It's sort of a awareness of just the limitation of individuality. In the samadhi state, you begin to experience that great aspect of self that's non-local, unbounded, omnipresent. And it comes gently and may be very obscure at first, and gets more and clearer and more astonishing as time goes on. As you begin to experience that, you will then have experiences where your mind and individuality is aware of, not just intellectually, but experiencing this infinity of consciousness while you're washing the dishes, or driving the car, or walking on the beach. That's what's called cosmic consciousness. Or it's the first higher state of consciousness. And that eventually gets to where it's in your dream time, it's at night when you're sleeping, it's when you're awake, it's all the time. But that may come and go for a long period of time until it becomes stabilized. The next phase is that because of that state of consciousness, you begin to have the experience naturally of the development of what's called God consciousness, referring to the celestial level of perception, where you begin to sense the creator state in all things. And this begins to develop where you see what's called celestial perception, for example, where you can see the life and the aura and the astral aspect of those flowers or of a stone or what have you, but also the cities. This is when the cities really pick up. You begin to be able to easily remote view, easily levitate, easily do a number of things. If you wish, you may not. But the key thing is that ability to be aware of not just unbounded mind, but how that then begins to go from utter, absolute, pure awakeness to the first fine resonant frequencies of relativity, the finest of which is the creator state, the God consciousness state. So when that is developed quite well, you actually are perceiving that creator aspect in all things. After that is really a bit abstract, and you have to be with someone who's experienced it, who will turn to you and say, "That's it." And it's called unity consciousness, and it's when you're not just perceiving that everything has this creative and creator state in it, and but you actually are seeing it as the pure consciousness itself, simultaneously. So this table, this machine, everything is simultaneously what it is, but it's also, you're experiencing it as absolute pure consciousness. Very rarefied, and a very fine sense of perception. Does this make sense? Mm-hmm. Now the next state is what's been called Brahman consciousness, and it's when you've had all those states, and then you're able to experience the mind of the entire creation as creator and as unbounded. Now, actually, I've been taking people to Brahman consciousness each night, but I haven't identified it as that, because I'm speaking what I'm actually experiencing. And that's when you're actually awake in an infinite state of mind, but you're experiencing the galaxies and the astral world, celestial, as sort of all aspects of your own being, but on a cosmic scale. Now that's called Brahman consciousness. B-R-A-H-M-I-N. It's from the Vedas in Sanskrit. There are other traditions that have other... Now, there are states beyond that, but they have never, to my knowledge, been experienced by humans in this dimension, because no one in this dimension has been ready. But if we got to that, we'd be great. So those are the primary states of... Now, it's not as if they're like linear. You may be having some experiences of celestial perception while you're just starting meditation. You may be having some experiences of cosmic consciousness, or an occasional experience of unity consciousness where you realize, wow, everything is... where you just feel that everything is awake. It's consciousness itself. It's the stuff of awareness, even though I'm walking on the sand. That's a unity consciousness experience. So they will overlap. I'm describing them because I have to use words and it's linear, but in reality it's an organic unfoldment. But these are the milestones that would be reached, from the normal waking state that humans have, to the meditative transcendent state of samadhi, to cosmic consciousness, to God consciousness, to unity consciousness, to Brahman consciousness. And beyond that, let's not be too worried about it right now. So, the civilizations that are visiting Earth, all of them understand cosmic consciousness, non-locality of mind, and operative systems that are non-linear, non-local. Some of them have been around for millions of years, where everyone on their planet is in a state of God consciousness and are born in a state of God consciousness. And if you ask me about it tonight, I will tell you what really happened at Rendlesham Forest. That is our future.